Okay, I'm going to try this. I'll wait just a minute, make sure people can hear me. Somebody would indicate that you can hear me. That would be helpful. Um, you can hear me? Okay. So this is just going to be very brief. I know I've been absent quite a bit lately. I've had a lot to do. Getting ready for speaking in Scotland in a week at the Moriel conference. And so I'm not sure how many times I'm speaking, 3 or 4 times. I'm trying to get packed and ready to go, get out of here on Sunday. And Sunday's update's probably going to be a little bit truncated just because of travel arrangements and getting to the airport and packed and that sort of thing. So pray for safe travels for me, as I try to. Just checking one of my lights, which went out, of course. Just pray for safe travels and everything. I'm not sure if the conference is going to be live streamed. You can check Moriel.org. You can check their Rumble or YouTube pages or RTN TV. We had some questions about whether there was sufficient bandwidth at the conference center at Gartmore. I think it's called Gartmore. Go to Moriel.org. You can find the details there. So I'm going to just cover just sort of a preview of some of the things I'm going to talk about on Sunday. And here we go. This is going to be pretty brief, but I think this is some important things. So let me grab the. Let's see if it goes. There we go. Okay, so we're in the midst of what I consider to be a very volatile financial situation. As you know, or may have heard me say in the past, I used to do a lot of work with commercial real estate. One of the things that I've noticed over time is that the demand destruction that occurred over the last 3 years has not been priced into the market. So let me give you an example of that. So here is Hilton Hotel in San Francisco is saying that, this is the title of the article, omens of fiscal ruin for downtown San Francisco. Defaults, missed payments threaten 13 buildings. The owner of 2 Hilton hotels, one is about a 2,000 room hotel. I think it's the largest in San Francisco. The other is about 1,000 or 1,100 room hotel, the Park 55, and then the Hilton on Union Square. This is right in the heart of the San Francisco commercial district. The owner of the hotels has said, listen, it's not worth it. San Francisco is not coming back anytime soon. We're throwing in the towel. We're not going to make any more payments on the mortgages. They owe about $700 million on the properties to banks. So what we're going to do is we're throwing in the towel. We're not going to make any more payments, and we're going to let the properties go through foreclosure. Now, what happens with that is about 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago, in the fallout from the 2008 financial crisis and mortgage meltdown in the way it affected commercial real estate, virtually all of the banks pulled properties from the foreclosure process almost at the same time. It almost was like it was concluded. So the business that I was doing in sort of high-end commercial property foreclosures, everybody in that business, it just dried up immediately. And part of the problem was that banks have to mark their properties to market. So let's say they've made a $100 million loan on a property, and the property's worth $200 million. The problem back 10, 11 years ago was so many properties were in foreclosure on the commercial side. This also happened on the residential side. But on the commercial side, it was destroying the value of the properties. So, for example, I was doing strip centers that were appraised at $5 million. And when we went through the foreclosure process, the property sold for $1.2 million. So then when other strip centers start going through that process, the comp property values is $1.2 million now, not $5 million. So their properties are worth less. And the banks have to reevaluate these and then mark the property to market. So they have to, instead of carrying it on the books as a $5 million asset, it now becomes a $1.2 million asset. And that upsets their liquidity ratios. They have to maintain a certain amount of liquidity. I think it's about 6 or 7% of their loan values as liquid. And that's so if people come in and want their deposits. And we saw what happened with Silicon Valley Bank and others when they started to have problems. Everybody wanted their money, and it's sort of a cascading snowball rolling down a hill situation. So what's going to happen with these properties in San Francisco, and they listed 13 of them. There was like the Hilton hotels. There was a couple California street properties. One of those might have been valued at one time at about $1.2 billion. Now it's valued at about $300 million, maybe less. And this is going to be true in commercial real estate markets all over the country. Because if you drive around and you watch, what you're going to observe is that the properties just aren't occupied. And when the properties aren't occupied, rents go down, cash flow goes down, and the property, there's a cascading effect, and the property becomes worth less. They've been able to keep a lid on this throughout this whole pandemic demand destruction. But now, so you start seeing the beginnings of it here in San Francisco, where they have a high crime problem and that type of thing. I was in San Francisco for a technology seminar 4 years ago. I think it was 4 years ago, May, last month. And this was a Silicon Valley thing. And even then, you could see the beginnings of the decline of San Francisco. And I think I came home and I told Pam, she did not go with me to the seminar. And I stayed at the Marriott right off Market Street, which is the main commercial thoroughfare there in San Francisco. And I said, I don't know that I'll ever go back to that city. Just before I left in the city, I somehow got onto an article that had been published, I think in the San Francisco Chronicle, about, it was a map that they had made up of the drug needle, drug paraphernalia, and poop, human poop that they found on the streets. And it was just shocking. So this is going to come, that's a financial crisis, and this is going to continue for, I just don't see any way out of it this time, how this is going to go. Now, the next thing we'll talk a little bit more about on Sunday is the Trump indictment. I've just been able to sort of glance at it. It's 37 counts. I personally think it's a travesty. I think it's a lot of made up thing, but there's a wide range of opinions. So if you watch the MSNBC people, they say we've crossed the Rubicon. This is terrible that this has to happen in America. And then you go to listen to people on the right, like Mark Levin, Judge Pirro on Fox. I was listening to her, and she's absolutely livid. And so is Levin. You can look up he did about a 15-minute rant on a show today with Martha McCallum. I think it was on The Five. And I agree with virtually everything that Mark Levin had to say. Then you look at someone in the center, like Jonathan Turley, who's I think a liberal law professor, but he's a reasonable guy. I would call him a classic liberal. He thinks that that the indictment has some very damning allegations in it. I saw a comment from Ann Coulter who said, yeah, all you idiots, this indictment is a horrible thing that's being done because it's designed to get Trump the nomination so he can lose to Biden again. I just think it shows that the justice system in the United States is completely corrupt. I don't know that there's going to be anything positive come out of this. I don't know how quickly things will happen. Trump has already had some people on his legal team resign, but I'll give you an example. I saw an interview, I think it was on Twitter. I'll try to play the clip on Sunday, of one of his attorneys who was called to testify. Now, when you're an attorney representing someone in a criminal case, you have a thing called attorney-client privilege, and attorney-client privilege is sacred in the law profession, and you're not allowed. It's not that you can wait. You can testify about your conversations with your client if you think it would be helpful to them or harmful to them. You're just not allowed to talk about it. That is sacrosanct in the law. Now, there are a couple of exceptions. There's a crime fraud exception, but that's rarely applied. I've not really seen it. And so if you're ever an attorney, and I've personally experienced this. I had a client who got into some problems. I was called before grand jury. One was because they didn't want me representing that client in the ongoing civil and criminal litigation that was taking place. There was an indictment that had been filed. I got subpoenaed to FBI interview. I got subpoenaed to the grand jury 3 times. And it's an intimidating thing. And this is what they do when they want to get the lawyers off the case. It's lawfare. It's to get you tied up with. You have to get lawyers yourself when this happens. It's a difficult position to be in. If you lie to the FBI, you lie during your testimony, they will come after you. And in my case, there were literally millions of pages of documents and hundreds of thousands of emails. And during the FBI interview, they would ask me questions about particular emails, but they would never show me the email. They're sitting there, and you know that they have the email in their hands, and they never show you that email. And then they ask you questions about it. So you have to be very careful about how you answer this. And this is what they do. This is what they did in the Enron case. This is what they did in high-profile other financial cases in the early 2000s. And so I'm just saying is that they're doing this to Trump now. And in the Trump case, they called one of his attorneys to testify. And during the thing, they asked him questions about, well, did you have this conversation with President Trump? And he's not allowed to answer that question. Oh, so you're not being helpful. You're trying to hide it. That sort of implies that Mr. Trump, why doesn't he just waive his attorney-client privilege if he's innocent? And if you were in front of a judge, the judge would shut the trial down. If a prosecutor did that, they would shut the trial down, and they would declare a mistrial, and they would probably discipline the prosecutor. But what happened was it happened in the grand jury proceedings, which are secret. There is a transcript made, but it's almost impossible to get the transcript of the grand jury proceedings to show that this is what happened. So this attorney said, listen, they were telling the grand jury that because Mr. Trump, President Trump, had not waived his attorney-client privilege, he must be guilty. That is a complete violation of ethics and what the Fifth Amendment, the right against self-incrimination, is all about. And this is what they're doing. So I agree with the statements that have made that we have crossed the Rubicon. This is a very, very dark day for the United States. So Sunday I intend to play a couple clips. I'm going to play some of Mark Levin. And I'm also going to play Alan Dershowitz. He was on War Room today, and he said this may be the end of America. And I think he's right. And Dershowitz is no fan of Donald Trump. He never voted for him, but Dershowitz is what I would call a classic liberal. And the fact that they're doing this is unprecedented. This is looking like, to me, like it's the end of American democratic republic. It's a very, very serious situation. So, talk more about that on Sunday, but I'm going to try to read the indictment between now and then. Okay, so another story that we're going to talk about Sunday is this is not the exact, this is a ID4D identification for development document that was prepared by the European Union, European Commission about digital identity. And this week, the WHO, the World Health Organization, and the European Commission entered into an agreement to use the digital identity wallets that the EU has been developing, and they want to push this out to everybody in the world eventually. So there's been a big push by Gates Foundation and others to develop digital identities for everybody. Here in the United States, I don't know that we formally have a digital identity, but pretty much everybody does have a digital identity. We may not know it, we may not know what it is, but there's a lot tied to our digital identity. And the push by people like the Gates Foundation and others has been to get the digital identity rolled out to the third world countries where they don't have a digital identity yet. You can see this all the time. I mean, everybody knows what you're thinking. You get ads all the time if you're on Facebook or Twitter that relate to things that you're talking about or looking about someplace else. Or sometimes it seems like even just thinking about it, you're going to get a video, you're going to get an ad. The other thing that I personally have noticed is that the ads seem to be inappropriate. There's also another story I'll try to talk about on Sunday about Meta, Facebook, and Instagram, and how their algorithms have encouraged, I don't know how else to say it, pedophiles to form groups and meet and share information and images. That study came from, it's published in the Wall Street Journal, and it was based on research done by Stanford and another research, either university or institution, ones that you wouldn't think would necessarily be going after that. So there's a big problem. We'll also talk about the constant push on pride. I did about a 5-minute interview with Allison Steinberg on the In Focus program on One American News the other night. You can get on Rumble. I hear it's also on YouTube. I don't know. Somebody told me they watched it on YouTube, where we talked about the pushing out of this pride and transgender agenda everywhere. One of the things I noted in that was that Florida has enacted laws to prohibit the chemical, pharmaceutical castration, alteration of young people, and a judge in Florida appointed by, not surprisingly, Clinton back in 1995 or 1996, ruled that the law was unconstitutional and could not be enforced with regard to 3 plaintiffs in that case. But there's going to be other courts that are going to pick up on this. This whole thing is a mess. I have also, just as I'm perusing through my Twitter feed, I come across these things that are videos of pride parades, and I can't share them with people to show them what's going on because they're so vile. And then what you see is you see all these people there with their kids. And so when you use the GROOM word about what we think is being done, it's being done. They're trying to desensitize the kids to this. And now we see that Meta has these algorithms that sort of encourage that. So that's that. So let me talk about Middle East and what we'll talk about more on Sunday. Again, this is Tehran. Iran came out and announced this week that they have a hypersonic weapon ready to go. Now, the question immediately is going to be, are they serious about this? Is it really ready to go? Have they done any testing on it? There's no indication that they've done any testing. They had a slick computer-generated graphical representation of this hypersonic missile. They claim that their missile will move at 13 times the speed of sound, Mach 13, and that there's nothing that Israel can do to overcome it. Here's another Iranian newspaper saying the same thing, that there's no, let's shrink this down a little bit, that there's nothing that the Zionists that they say, that always refer to it as the Zionist entity, they never mention Israel. There's nothing that they can do to stop this. I don't know if that's true. I think a lot of that depends on the maneuverability of the hypersonic weapon. I think that once it's up to speed, it's very difficult to do. I've talked to some people that were, there was this allegation in Ukraine that Ukraine had shot down some Russian hypersonic missiles. Russia said, no, they haven't. The word from defense analysts that I've been able to get is that they probably did shoot down the weapons, but they probably shot down the weapons before they went hypersonic, before they achieved a speed where they just, the defense missiles could not get to them. So the question is, what's the answer on this? I personally think that let's assume that Iran has developed this. In my view, the development of a hypersonic missile by Iran, and if it's done, it's pretty impressive. They're under extreme sanctions, have been for a long time. And if they've been able to develop this while they're under those sanctions, it's a pretty impressive thing that they've done. And I also think that it's going to be as big a deal as the nuclear weapon. This would be a big game changer, assuming Israel doesn't have the capability of shooting these things down. And then the question is, how quickly can they manufacture them and get them into service? But I think that if it is true, it's certainly very concerning, and it is a bit of a game changer. And I think it's on the order of magnitude of Iran actually having a nuclear weapon. It really changes things. Now, Israel's desperately trying to quickly develop defense responses to this, laser weapons and that type of thing. But my understanding is those are not ready to go, and they're probably not going to be ready to go for, I think they hope to have them within a year. Then that raises the whole question about how does Israel respond to this? Does Israel do something? Does Israel act alone? There have been hopes that Israel was going to be able to enter into some kind of normalization agreement with the Saudis. The Saudis seem to be leaning more towards Iran. They opened an embassy in Tehran this week, first time in many, many years. Again, it's something that I think is something that is to be very concerned about. Here's an article from the Times of London talking about the hypersonic missile. Again, they're touting this. You'll see the videos I'll play on Sunday about that. It's a big deal. There's a tremendous amount of tension in the Middle East. I'm going to recommend that you go to the JNS YouTube channel, Jewish News Syndicate, JNS, and listen to Caroline Glick's interview this week with David Wormser. I have tremendous amount of respect for both of them. I think it's very well done. It's level-headed. It's a solid analysis of the situation. So that's JNS YouTube channel. I'll try to put a link in the show notes after I'm done. Caroline Glick interviewing David Wormser. I would also recommend Caroline's, I've just read the first couple paragraphs, Caroline's article at jns.org this week, or column, about what the left is doing in Israel. And I think you will see significant parallels between what the left is doing in Israel and the way they're acting in Israel over the judicial reform question, and the way that the left is acting in the United States. The legal system has been weaponized so that when somebody on the left does something that's wrong, clearly against the law, they don't get arrested. But, for example, if you're a person in Reading, Pennsylvania at a pride parade and you read the scripture out loud on a public sidewalk, you will be arrested. That happened in Reading, Pennsylvania this week. I'll play you that video on Sunday. So we're in a sort of thinking about this as I was prepping my talks for Scotland. You know, you think back about what it was like. In a couple of weeks, we're going to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the start of Fellowship Bible Chapel. It's hard to believe it's been 10 years. But I started putting up my videos right just before we started Fellowship Bible Chapel. I have continued. You can go back. I would recommend you go back and look at some of those from 10 years ago and see what we were talking about. And what you'll see is you'll see a lot of things we were never talking about. Also talk some about Sunday about artificial intelligence, some recent developments, a little bit more from the NVIDIA presentation that I think I played part of last week. It's developing very, very rapidly. I follow some people on Twitter that I get some feeds on Twitter about people who are doing development work in artificial intelligence, and the programs and plugins and all these sorts of things that you can use now are just, it's hard to even keep up with the way people are using it. So this is not going to be walked back. And there was a recent talk by Yuval Harari, we'll play part of that on Sunday as well, where he was talking about the development, and essentially says, look, and we're gonna develop, this could develop a religion. And I think he's right. One other thing that I don't remember if I talked about it on Sunday. I gotta find my cursor here. Here we go. So you can remind me if I talked about it or not. There's about a year and a half ago, I put up a image that I found at templemount.org. And it was a proposal that someone had made about how to modify the Dome of the Rock to allow all the religions of the world to worship on the Temple Mount. There was an architectural proposal that came out last week, and I don't remember if I talked about it on Sunday or not, that talked about something similar to build a way for Jews to worship at the Temple Mount, and it was going to make another level at the Temple Mount. And part of this is leading to this article. This is from the Tehran Times, June 10th publication, Saturday's publication, talking about talk in the Israeli Knesset among some of the, I think this is a Likud minister that has been talking about this, is about dividing up Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Al-Aqsa compound. And that is, that shows the dishonesty on the Islamic side. They call this the Al-Aqsa compound. There is a mosque there called the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The entire area was called Haram al-Sharif. There was a publication, I've used that a number of times, back in 1924, in the 1920s, by the Waqf, that's the Islamic person who runs the Temple Mount for Islam. It said this is where Solomon's temple was. Now they're saying there's no evidence that there's any Jewish presence there. But then again, I would highly recommend you go dig out Mordecai Kadar's article from about 2008 that he wrote. Excellent paper showing that there was never Islamic. This was not the farthest mosque in Muhammad's night journey. That never was true. That was fake. That's all made up. So let's see. So let me just look at the questions here. This is kind of always hard to manage. I think I saw a question about Damascus up the thread here. When is the destruction of Damascus? So listen, let's there's a number of different views. So for example, thank you, Peter, Gartmore House, about 30 miles north of Glasgow is where that conference I'll be speaking at next weekend will take place, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Damascus. There's a number of different views. So Mark Hitchcock, I think Andy Woods, some others hold the view that the prophecy concerning Damascus in Isaiah 17 has already been fulfilled. There are many others. I personally don't think it's been fulfilled. I think it's yet to be fulfilled. The question is, when does it happen? And does it happen, say, for example, before Ezekiel 38, 39? And is that what triggers Ezekiel 38 and 39? Because the area of Syria is not really mentioned. So I'm going to give you the answer is, I'm not sure when it happens. I think it does happen. I think there are reasons for it. You're seeing a tremendous push for normalization between the Arab countries and Syria right at the moment. Part of that, I think, is the Saudis have made the determination. There was a blurb someplace this week that Mohammed bin Salman had said he's done dealing with the United States. Now, he still does deal with the United States, and he deals with the Gulf situation. They just had the big settlement about the Gulf tours, sort of merging them back together. We'll see how that goes. But the Saudis are throwing their money around. They're cutting back on production to raise the price of oil so they can make more money. And they're doing things, they're essentially, they've said, we're done with the United States. We're not dealing with them anymore. And so then what's the implication of that? What's the implication of that with regard to Israel and what it might do with Iran? Would they be able to overfly Saudi territory to attack Iran? That is very much up in the air right now. So it's a very volatile situation. There was a shooting on the Egyptian-Israel border down in the Negev last week, and 3 Israeli Jewish soldiers were killed by an Egyptian soldier. Go look up their funeral on YouTube and watch it. It tears your heart apart. That's the reality of the situation. It's still very volatile. It's I think as volatile as anything that I've seen in all the years that I've been watching. So we'll talk about all these things on Sunday. Let me just take a quick look here for any all caps questions. Do you think Iran will make a move regarding Israel? Will they strike? Veronica, I don't know if they will or not. I think that somebody's going to do something. Right now, there's like this little dance. Israel attacks Iranian sites and assets in Syria. They don't usually go direct into Iran, although they do in a few situations. Iran does things that are provocative, but they don't do anything that's so provocative that they're going to actually get Israel to do something. At some point, somebody's going to cross the line and everything's going to break loose in terms of a war. How soon that is, I don't know. So I think Iran right now does not want to do it. They have some economic problems. They have demographic problems. They have political problems. But listen, and they're under sanctions, but there's increasing ties between Russia and Iran on an economic standpoint. So I think that um, it's very volatile and it could change at any moment. And now the question is there something going on with relation between Egypt and Israel with the shooting that occurred on the border last week? That's up in the air right now. I think Amir Avivi from the Israeli Defense and Security Forum will do a briefing on that on Tuesday. You might want to try to find out when that's happened. But uh, it, it does seem like everything's really kind of coming apart. So this is, I mean, but this is, I think, the world that the Lord said would be, it would be like as we get closer to the end. I don't think it's going to change. I think I used the statement last Sunday that, uh, and I see the comments all the time. We all want to get out of here, okay? We're all tired of this, but we're here. So we have something to do while we're here. And I think that the question ought to be, well, how much are we going to see before we're out of here? And the answer to that is, well, at least as much as we've already seen, and probably a lot more. And I think you're going to see increasing Christian persecution here in America. Um, Trump, um, some people have feelings about Trump that concern me. I'm also concerned about the implications of what they do to him, they'll do to others like Christians. And there's this narrative out there. It's pure propaganda. It's misinformation. They accuse the one side of disinformation when they're the ones that are doing it. It's an amazing thing to um, uh, well, let's just put it this way: the people in charge are making a mess of the world, uh, and are they trying to act, and do something uh, noble in what they're doing? I don't know. I think that we're going to see. I think a lot of this is intentional. So you see this push for digital currencies. You see artificial intelligence. You see a lot of these things we're not even talking about 10 years ago. And I think we're going to be talking about this until the Lord actually does return, and we get out of here. Or, those of us who are older, we pass on. And that's always a possibility. So I've said this many times. I'm glad I'm 69. I'm glad that I'm an old guy when I see all of these things happening, because it's very disconcerting. I look at my great nieces and nephews and wonder if the Lord tarries, what's the world going to be like for them. It's not a very happy prospect. So listen, talk to you Sunday. Again, I'll try to find out whether the Morial conference is going to be live streamed. I don't think it is, just because we're not sure about the technical capabilities at the conference site. Although I did get an email that they have pretty good Wi-Fi there, and maybe even 5G. So maybe it will be. If not, it'll certainly be put up on the various Morial outlets, on Rumble, YouTube, RTN TV, and other places. So look for those. I'll be with you at 11 o'clock, roughly 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Sunday, and we'll talk about some of these things in more detail, from the Trump indictment to the real estate meltdown to the Iranian development of a hypersonic weapon. And we'll probably also talk a little bit about, I haven't even mentioned Russia-Ukraine. Sometimes I like to talk about it because you talk about Russia-Ukraine and you immediately get everybody's got a different opinion and everybody's going to fight and tear into you. Honestly, folks, there's so much propaganda flowing in that space that it's difficult to determine what's true. And so when I see somebody say this is absolutely what happened, I'm very skeptical, because I don't think we really know. And there's a lot of people dying in Ukraine, a lot of Ukrainians dying, I think a lot of Russians dying. We had this dam that was blown up that has flooded a huge area. We'll talk a little bit about the fires in Quebec and other places in Canada and in the U.S., but these fires in Quebec that all seem to start at the same time. Was that the result of an electrical storm or something else? Who knows? But it affected the air quality here in Ohio. It was today was fine, but the few days before leading up to this were pretty nasty, but nothing compared to what New York was going through. So very strange world. I mean, we're seeing things that we've never really seen before, and I think we're just at the beginning. So anyway, God bless. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you or talk to you on Sunday. Thank you.